Hey there, it's Katie Jarvis with Managing the Mess. As we approach the end of the first quarter, I thought I would talk about grading in the elementary art room. In my district, we give 4 art grades for each student at the end of every quarter. So on their progress report, they receive a grade for their process, their product, their understanding, and their effort. And it's done on a 4-point scale. So 4 would mean that they're consistently exceeding expectations. 3 is going to be the largest category of students that usually meet expectations in art. 2 would be students that sometimes meet expectations. And 1 is for students that seldom meet expectations. We have 2 other marks that we can use. NT for not taught, if one of those categories had not been touched on. And NA, which is not assessed, which I use more often, especially for new students that come in where I just want to have enough information about where they're at. That's when I would use that mark. If you watch this video all the way to the end, you're going to find some tips and tricks for grading to help keep you more organized. I cannot emphasize to you enough, you do not want an angry parent coming to you at the end of the quarter. Nobody should be shocked at the grades that you are given. What you can do to prevent this is look at your quarter and figure out what is the halfway point. Put this in your planner, put this in your calendar, and during that week, take a little bit of time to look at all your classes and all of your students. I keep my grades in Google Sheets, more on that in a bit, but I love it because you can conditionally format each little block. So every time that I'm putting in a lowered score of a 2 or a 1, it's coming up in a different color. So it's really easy to see the trends of students that might be falling a bit behind. For those that are falling below, I keep track of who that is. And then I see, have I reached out to that family already this quarter? Do they already know where things stand? Or is this something that I need to formally put in writing? I do have an interim form that I use. I would recommend to you to just make it look just like your report card. So we have 4 different sections that we're grading on. So I just put all of those statements there. And then I mark an X next to the one that is an area of needing improvement. I will also write a sentence or 2 specific to that student. I sign it, I have the administrators sign it, I will put it in an envelope that comes from our district and send that home. I ask that parents either sign it and return it, or at the very least, message me and let me know that they have seen it. That's going to help eliminate a lot of those end of the quarter complaints. No doubt, grading in art can be a little bit tricky, so make sure that you are very clear on your expectations. I learned this lesson so hard as a student. I was in a new district and I was taking a college level course. And of course, I wanted to impress the professor. Not only were they a college professor, but they were also the head of the fine arts department in the district where I worked. And we were given an assignment. And it was a little bit vague. I don't remember exactly what the terms were. It was something about like making up some type of machine. And that's sort of all I knew, but I spent hours on this, hours. And I was like so excited to turn it in. And when we got to the class, the lesson was about how the teacher couldn't really grade the assignments because there were no parameters given about what needed to be included or how it would have been assessed. It was literally just a lesson. And trust me, I took this to heart because I had put a lot of effort into it, but I realized other people were so unclear on the directions that they did nothing, or they only did like a little sketch and did very little. The products that they were getting were all completely different because the setup for things was not clear. So when you're giving directions on what is needed in the project, you really need to teach what it is that's needed. You don't want to say, like my 6th graders right now are doing a project where they are coloring. I don't want to just say, I'm grading this on craftsmanship as well. You're going to get a grade just on craftsmanship. So make sure you're coloring this neatly. That's not enough, okay? You need to make sure that you are teaching to your students how, in this example, to do good coloring. So I demonstrate for them how you might want to color the outside of an object first. and then fill it in faster, because you can go outside and be very careful on the edges. And I show them this good coloring rubric. I'll be sure to link this down in the description. It's something I found on Teachers Pay Teachers, but it has about coloring in the lines, and it shows like what not to do and then what we're looking for. Colors that make sense, no white spaces. So the expectation is that they are filling them in as much as they can, and that they are using 5 or more colors when they are coloring. So giving that parameter, teaching what it is that I am looking for and will be grading them on, is what you need to set things up for in each and every project. You're not just saying, oh, today we're painting a pumpkin, but you're giving them, these are the painting techniques that we're going to use. You know, I'm going to be looking for this and this and this in your final project. I'm going to be looking that you have overlapping, and you need to teach what overlapping is and how to be successful. So in my pumpkin lesson, I'm showing like what it would look like if there was x-ray vision and we didn't have overlapping, and then what it looks like when it's correct. What it looks like when the pumpkin is sitting on the grass versus accidentally making the pumpkin kind of floating into the air. Those all need to be taught if that's what you're grading and assessing at the end. So it's something to keep in mind before you're grading things, to think back on what directions did you give and are you grading fairly. You don't want to be in a situation where people are not feeling like you can back up the grades that you are given. You need to have a lot of evidence of how students are doing within your class and the structures that you have in place to help them to be successful. A strategy to try with your grading is to take a whole class worth of artwork and sort it by the ones that exceed expectations, to the ones that meet expectations, to the ones that are lower than you would have expected. And that way you can see the size of the piles and see, you know, how your students are doing with that lesson. Whatever pile is the largest, you don't have to go through and grade those. You can just go in and mark, okay, which students got a 2, they're in this lowest pile here, and then which ones are in the highest pile, and note those as your 4s. And then you know everyone else that's missing is a 3, so you can pop those in without checking each student's name. If you're doing something like this, you just have to be very sure that you're marking which students were absent on that particular day. The best way to stay organized with your grading is to stay organized with managing your artwork, which is not easy. So a system that I have found really works well is to have seat numbers. So for me, I have these little cutouts of a paintbrush that I found on Amazon. I'll pin them in a comment down below. I went onto my computer, I printed out numbers, and I attached those numbers to the paintbrushes and laminated them. I used packing tape to put these on the legs of my chair, so underneath the table where students are not touching or picking those numbers. And then each seat has a different number. I have this recorded on my seating charts. These are on Teachers Pay Teachers and a couple different variations if you're interested. But Picasso has a number 1 underneath the table where he sits. He is listed at the red table. Underneath the little box, it says number 1 here on my seating chart. He is in my grade book, which is color coded right up at the top, number 1 in that little red rectangle that you can see there. When we line up, I have numbers on the floor, and Picasso would line up on the first spot, number 1. And my favorite part of all, I don't have my students write their name on their artwork. I have pre-printed mailing labels, and surprise, there's numbers on them. The seating numbers are on there. So this is not in alphabetical order. I set this up in number order. So Picasso sits in the first seat, number 1. He's listed here on the first label. Jacob Lawrence sits at seat number 2. So I have him on the second label. Same with my grade book. My grade book is not in alphabetical order. It is in seat order. This way, when I have artwork I'm taking off the drying rack, let's say it's a 2-day painting, I can have an IA or a student put the artwork in number order before we put it away. And then when we pull it out, passing it out is a cinch. It literally takes like 30 seconds to pass out everyone's painting to them because they are already in order. Having the artwork already in number order makes it much faster to grade. I simply put the name of the artwork at the top as a heading, and then I enter in the student's score and I hit the enter key and it pops it right down to the next row. So I'm able to do this fairly quickly. If a student is absent, I make sure to note that in my grade book and it pops up as another color. On the student's artwork, let's say we're working on a painting that's going to take us several days. On their artwork, I would write the letter A with a marker so I know when I'm grading it that they were absent and then they missed part of the instruction. If a student is not there the first day of a project and we're passing out paper, we will just put their name on tag on a blank piece of paper and mark that absent, but shuffle it in so that when we get into class the next week, that student already has a piece of paper. We don't have to go hunting around for any materials for that student, but we can also clearly see that they were not there and catch them up on what they missed. I keep mentioning how I use Google Sheets for my grading, so take a closer look at how I have this set up. I have it set up in 3 separate sheets, so it's tabs at the bottom to the 3 different categories that I'm grading students on. So I have one page that's just for engages, and then the list of students is there on the side. I can toggle to the next one, and it's color-coded at the bottom and at the top. The next one is for my media and techniques grades. I just copied and pasted the students over to the next page, and then a sheet for their understanding grades. Now, how this is set up is it is in seat number order, but also it is by table color. So the first 3 seats I have at the red table are seat number 1 is Picasso, seat number 2 Jacob Lawrence, seat number 3 Andy Goldsworthy. I have 2 tables pushed together. So the pink table is actually seat number 4. It's not the last seat of the red table. Red table is actually also number 8 Vermeer, so that's why you see a little red down a little bit lower on my sheet, but the table color really helps keep me organized. Having them not be in alphabetical order but being in seat order really helps me to grade things quickly. So how I have this set up is I will write down the project at the top. So this is like a planning sheet. And then there is a spot where you can add in a drop-down menu for that little rectangle, that little cell that's next to the student's name. And you can make them so that these are all the same. You can drop down and you can choose which things you'd like to be there. So when I start to type in the word absent, it pops up, or if I use that drop-down menu and I select absent, the whole cell turns magenta because I've set that up under the conditional formatting. And that's just like a little code you put in for if I type this word, make it this color. And if they get a number 1, it turns yellow. If they get a 2 on a project, it turns magenta. 3, it turns blue. 4, it turns turquoise. If they get a WH, it turns that purple color. That means with help. I like to note this in my grade book. If I'm providing a significant amount of support and like helping a student with a project, I'm actually touching their artwork and interacting with their artwork to help them to finish. Or if there's an IA that's really hands-on and is completing a student's artwork for them in a way, they're kind of working just one-on-one and providing a lot of help, I mark that in my gradebook because I might see that finished artwork and it's not telling the whole story about what happened if an adult provided assistance on the project. I will put in IC for incomplete, and that pops up in red because it means that the student is a catch-up, meaning that later on they have to catch up on that work and finish it. More on that in a bit. And then I have NA for not assessed. So if a student is new, they come in like midway through the quarter, all the projects that I've already graded for that quarter, I would go in and mark them not assessed, and then it pops up in lime green so I can see that that student did not complete those assignments, nor are those assignments missing, just something that they weren't here for that does not apply to them. Now, I really love this because I'm able to see the colors and see a pattern about how the students are doing. I highly recommend finding out a system that works for you on how to grade your students as they're in your art room, because there's nothing worse than having a mountain of artwork at the end of the day to grade, or even worse, a mountain of artwork at the end of the quarter that you need to grade before your progress reports or report cards are due. Something that I'm having a lot of success with is using these little dry erase pouches, and I just keep the dry erase marker right inside of there. When I'm ready to grade a class, I take their name tag labels, because that's my most up-to-date class list, and it's in number order. You could do this with your seating chart or just a list you've printed out of your students as well. And then I walk around and I grade each student as they are working. And then I'm able to put the grades in while they're continuing to work, and there's nothing for me to do for that class at the end of the day. Now, this took me a minute to figure out. I don't know why, but you only need to mark down the highs and the low grades. So if someone is getting a 3, which is kind of my average grade, I don't mark that down. And I start right at the first seat at the first table, and then I just walk around each table, marking down for me if somebody is a 2 or a 4, and then I go over to my computer and I enter in those grades, and then my grading for that class is done. You could also do this by printing out lists and putting it on a clipboard. You could do this as your students are lined up, if they take their artwork back with them. In my school, I didn't mention this before, but this is another perk of the labels and being really organized with your artwork. I am able to put my student artwork in the teachers' mailboxes, because everything is uniformly, neatly labeled. Like, the label's always in the top right-hand corner on everybody's painting. It's all the same. And I haven't gotten complaints from teachers about passing back artwork, and I think it's because of that. If I had no name papers and some disorganization in there, I don't think they'd be so willing to help. I'm super thankful that they do, because that's a really big task, and it makes it really hard when you're grading all of those students to also be in charge of returning all of that artwork. So I'm able to put it in their mailboxes, and then they help me with that. If you've got any more tips about grading students and assessing them while they're in the classroom to save some time, make sure you leave some comments down below. I'd love to see a discussion get started on your tips for doing grading. Completing those progress reports at the end of the quarter is a lot of extra work. I personally have probably 500 students, and each one of them receives 4 art grades. So I am putting in lots of grades. A strategy that really helps me is that I have a ketchup and pickle day. So I am blocking this out the whole last week of the quarter. We shut down all of the new projects and art making. We're not getting new assignments. I'm not grading anything new. What we're doing on that day is I'm looking at my grade book, and anybody that's marked absent or incomplete, I am collecting all of their artwork. Most of it that's 2D is going to have like a little ketchup sticker on the back of it. It's going to be inside of their table folders, but I would locate if they have a clay project they need to glaze or anything like that throughout the art room and have those materials ready. When the students come, if they are a ketchup, we announce that, and they sit in the front of the art room at a table with me. As they are finishing up their artwork, I am grading it in real time. I also will provide activities for students that they get to pick and choose. So that's what we call a pickle. So as soon as they finish their ketchup work, they do turn into a pickle, getting to choose some free time options. Now, I have a video that kind of dives into all those different choices and how that day runs in a little bit more detail, and I'll be sure to link that down below. The kids really enjoy this. It gets them to work hard every single week, knowing that this is coming, and it's not a behavior incentive. It doesn't matter if it's a class that needs like a ton of redirection, they still get this day to work on things and to have some free time. Now, classes that do need more reminders and move slowly through the projects because of their behavior do have more catch-up work. Your classes that are just moving really smoothly through things, you're going to see less kids have to be catch-ups. But it's great for students that are absent, that don't have like paints or glaze and things at home, for them to have an opportunity to finish things. Now, my goal is that I like to try to have my progress reports for that class done by the time that they leave my art room. Now, I do have an hour, so I've got a little bit more time than others, but I am working on it while they're in here, while they're having the free time. Now, something that I do to help with that, so that my whole focus that week can be on, you know, just finishing all the grades and planning things for the next quarter, is I, on that day only, have mystery cleaners. So students can earn a prize if they get lucky and find some random things in my room that are not in the right spot. So like before we start cleaning up, I'll be like, okay, there's a glue stick on the ground, there's a scissors over there. And then I watch and see whoever happens to pick up those things, they earn a prize. So this helps because students might not want to stop doing a free time activity if there wasn't that motivation of a little prize. And then my room is immaculate. It is so clean because they know that they might earn that prize. And that way, during my planning time, I'm not walking around and picking stuff up off the floor. I'm not having to clean up my art room. I'm leaving out all the free time activities for the whole week. I'm able to use any planning time that I have to focus in on my grading. Now, another really tricky thing about grading is students that are absent, and ketchup and pickle day is a great strategy to help out with that, but I've got lots more suggestions in my video all about absent and new students that you can watch here.